Okay. So, um, as I mentioned before, these series of meditations that I've been guiding over the last few months and for the next couple of months are based on a traditional sequence of meditations called the Stages of the Path, or the Lam Rim is the Tibetan name. Stages of the Path, Stages of the Path to Enlightenment specifically it's coming from the Buddhist tradition. The stage of the path is structured into three sections: the initial scope, the intermediate scope, the great scope. This, these meditations for the next few months, looking at the great scope, where the main focus is on developing a good heart. So the last few meditations, a lot of the focus there was on ourself and getting to know better how our mind works. How we create a sense of ourself in such a way that causes us to experience suffering unnecessarily. And so the whole point of these teachings is to help to cut through the suffering that we unnecessarily create for ourselves. But as we build that capacity, as we build that peace of mind for ourselves, our own inner strength, our own ability to abide in peace and joy and so forth. What's even more important is developing the warm heart, loving kindness, mind of empathy and so forth that turns our attention to others and thinks about not just ourselves, but thinks about how we can maximize our ability to help others. And so this is the focus of the great scope, figuring out how we can increase our capacity, our mental capacity to help others. It's an interesting way of framing it that's taught in the Lam Rim, increasing our mental capacity. Do we have a small, and there's a little bit of encouragement built into the Lam Rim. This initial scope is called the stage of the path meditation of a small being. The intermediate scope, the stage of the path meditation of a middling being. And the great scope is the stages of meditation of a great being. So then the question is, what kind of being do you want to be? And of course, you want to be a great being. Everybody wants to be a great being. So the point of these meditations is to whisk you along through to, we want to meditate on the stage of the path to be a great being. So to be a great being, you need a great mental capacity. My teacher used to clarify, we're not talking about being a physically great being. You can be a physically small being, but a mentally great being. I don't think you were confused about that, but just in case, to clarify. So to be a great being, what do you need? You need a great mental capacity. So a great mental capacity, well, that could mean like a capacity for memorization, but that's not what we're talking about, or a capacity for talking a lot. That's not what we're talking about. The capacity, for example, for thinking about others. How much can you fit in your mind? How much space do you have in your mind to be concerned for others, for example? And how much space do you have in your mind even to be concerned for your future self, not even thinking about anything, just literally this delayed gratification. We know we struggle sometimes with delayed gratification. Do we have, do we follow what's immediately pleasurable for ourselves? There's obviously always tempting to follow what's immediately pleasurable. Or do we do something that's of longer term benefit for ourselves and others? So even that, we have to increase our mental capacity, have a bit more space for discipline in our mind, and a bit more space and a lot more space to turn our attention to others. In the Great Scope meditations, there are an enormous number of different teachings on how to develop a good heart. And this, I know many people used to comment when they received these teachings. I'm not trying to prejudice you in terms of how you should feel or think, but a lot of people who receive these teachings come away and they think, wow, everybody used to tell me, everybody says, oh, you should be more empathetic, you should be kind, you should be compassionate, and so forth, but nobody tells you how to do that. So these meditations are all about how to do that. how we can gradually change and shift and shape our mind into a different state. And so these meditations on developing a good heart can be summarized. There's a traditional verse that we can use and an analogy that may help us to understand. They can be explained by introducing different kinds of love and compassion, like there's different minds of love and compassion. So this verse is, on the ground of affectionate love, sow the seeds of cherishing love and water them. So on the ground of affectionate love, sow the seeds of cherishing love and water it with the water of compassion and wishing love. And from this, the harvest of bodhicitta, with this special mind, I'll explain in a minute, called bodhicitta, the harvest of bodhicitta will arise. So on the ground of affectionate love, sow the seeds of cherishing love and water it with the water of compassion and wishing love. And from this, the harvest of bodhicitta will arise. So it's actually introducing 5 minds, 5 different variations on this mind of love. We use the word love. I remember being on a work webinar where we're talking about technology subjects, and I was commenting with another co-presenter. I was commenting on the Great Resignation and the reason why people leave their jobs. And the reasons were not well understood, but when they actually interviewed people, the reasons people were leaving were that they didn't feel like they were valued by their boss. They didn't feel they were valued by their company. They didn't feel a deep sense of connection with their coworkers. And I'm like, it's love. Like, people want to be loved. And I remember I said that in the webinar. My co-presenter cringed a little bit. He's like, oh, love. Because love, of course, has this ambiguous meaning, right? It's like a bit awkward thing. I'm not sure. In the workplace, we can talk about empathy now, which I'm really pleased that we can talk about empathy and we can talk about compassion. Love's a little sketchy. Be careful. Ambiguous meaning. Is Greek, right? Famously, the Greeks have these 3 words for love. Eros is the erotic love, the romantic love, and so forth. That's the one that makes people a little bit uncomfortable. And I may screw this up because I didn't recall these previously, but amoros or something, which is the like warm heart, the just general affection, and one other, I'm sure one of you probably remember it, but
pathos.
Pathos, which is maybe empathizing with others, or okay, perfect, great, thank you for. I need to prepare better for these sessions. Something like that. And I know in Sanskrit, right, where a lot of the Indian holy teachings came from, there's many, many words for love, like at least 10, 15 words for love. And so each of these words, these 5 that I mentioned, they each have a different name in Sanskrit. So affectionate love, this first one that we're talking about, is known as metta, sometimes called loving kindness or maitri. Metta is the Pali word, maitri is the Sanskrit word. That's a little bit better in that domain compared to the Greek, a little bit awkward. But so metta or maitri is loving kindness. Affectionate love is the formal name. And this teaching tonight is on developing a warm heart. And so if we want to summarize this affectionate love, we can think of it as a warm heart and a feeling of closeness. These 2 characteristics, a warm heart and a feeling of closeness. And so on the ground of this warm heart and feeling of closeness, on the ground of this affectionate love, we'll sow the seed of cherishing love, which is a mind that really values others as precious. Pour the water of compassion, which is a mind that's concerned about others' suffering and wishing love, that wants them to be happy. And from this, the harvest of bodhicitta will arise. And bodhicitta is a very special kind of mind that is a mind that wants to maximize our wisdom and skill out of compassion for others, wants to become enlightened, awakened, but basically cut through all of our delusions and limitations to maximize our ability to help others. So tonight we focus on affectionate love. How do we develop this mind? I mentioned that it's possible to train in this mind, to actually develop this mind of affectionate love. We can change our mind. We can develop minds by adopting new ways of thinking. Even now, your mind is already changed, right? We have this very fixed sense of who we are and what we're like. We think of ourselves as nouns. Sometimes I say this, right? Like we think that I am so-and-so and I'm like this. We think of ourselves as a noun that has a bunch of adjectives. I'm a nice person. I'm not a nice person. I'm very disciplined. I'm not very disciplined. None of that is true, right? We are all kinds of things. Depends on which moment you catch us in. Like, am I a selfless person? Sometimes. Am I a selfish person? Sometimes. Depends on what moment you catch me in, right? Do I want to cultivate the more selfless parts of myself? Do I want to contain and pacify the more selfish parts of myself? I do. How much energy am I putting into that? And that's what we call mental training. And so there, where we're putting energy into a new way of thinking, that's training the mind. That's changing the mind. That's shifting gradually, becoming a slightly different person. Because we're becoming a slightly different person anyway. Whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, you're always becoming a slightly different person. Here, we're doing that intentionally. We're shifting. We're trying to nurture these characteristics. So how do we become a person who is more affectionate, more warm-hearted, this warm heart and feeling of closeness? How do we become a person who's more warm-hearted with a more natural feeling of closeness to others? There's two methods. One is by feeling that we have a special relationship with others already, just redefining our relationship with others. And the second is by contemplating the kindness of others, by reflecting on their kindness. These two. The first is about changing our identity, who we think we are, so that we can understand we have a special relationship with others already. And the second is by contemplating where we've come from and what has caused things. The kindness, meditating on the kindness of others, looking at where all the benefit that we receive has come from. So the traditional Buddhist way of this first meditation, changing our sense, our understanding of our relationship with others, involves contemplating past and future lives. Now, do you need to believe in past and future lives to do this meditation? This meditation, that belief, is a way to sort of stand outside of this life, or in our imagination at least, stand outside of this life and look at this life a bit from the outside to get a bit more leverage, to get a bigger perspective, to consider time, to consider all of time and all of space. It actually doesn't matter that much whether it's true, if it's true or not, whether it's past and future lives or not, doesn't matter so much. In fact, what matters is using that, is being able to adopt a worldview that allows us to have a much more flexible mind, a much more flexible understanding of the world. And so the traditional way to think about this is that we have had countless past lives, and we will have countless future lives. Now, this implies that there is a we, and this is the tricky part, right? So the idea that, is there a we to have had countless past lives? Is there a we who might have countless future lives? No. If you think of yourself as a stream, right, or a drop of water, what is the past life of a drop of water? What is the future life of a drop of water? Interesting question. It didn't come from nowhere. Doesn't go to nowhere, right? But it's very hard to nail down where that drop of water came from. One drop, right? Where's it going? Never destroyed. Conservation of mass, conservation of energy. But so however we think about it, but if we imagine, if we had had countless previous lives, in every one of those lives, we would have had a mother. And that mother was the person who brought us into existence, the person without whom we would not exist. And there's something extraordinarily special about a relationship with our mother, because literally we are produced from her, and without her, we would not exist. And there's something very, very psychologically deep and psychologically profound about grappling with the reality that this body, for example, was entirely produced from somebody else's body. That's not how we think normally, right? But it's very strange, right? It psychologically sort of shifts because we feel like I'm very independent of my parents. I've moved out of home 30 years ago. I'm very independent of my parents. I don't need them. I don't call them for money. I don't call them for advice. Totally independent, right? You're not. Without them, you wouldn't exist. Therefore, ergo, you are not independent, never were, never will be. And so, isn't it good to be independent? Kind of. But it's a little bit false, a little bit misleading, right? I'm a self-made man, right? No, you're not. We've been made by our teachers. We've been made by our parents. We've been made by our society. We're enabled by the countless opportunities that we have. And if you take away everything else, at the very least, if you are alive, your mother took care of you for at least 9 months, right? Even people who were put up for adoption, even people who had terrible childhoods and so forth, at least those 9 months, your mother, her very body sustained you with her blood and warmth and nutrients and so forth. And it is only because of that person that we are alive today. That is incredibly psychologically profound. So just reflecting on the kindness of our mother from this life can begin to awaken that warm heart. Even if we didn't know her much or very well, there's a special feeling that can arise that we can describe as a warm heart and a feeling of closeness. And if you did have a rough, I have to qualify, because many people have a counterpoint that they've had a rough experience with their mother. If your mother doesn't work, you can think about somebody else. Someone has been kind to you, or many people have been kind to you. But so if we consider in this life, we've had a mother. In our previous lives, if we've had previous lives, in each of those lives, we've had a mother. Where are those mothers now? Where have they been reborn? They've been, so again, the traditional Buddhist teaching, where are all of those mothers now? They've died, they've taken rebirth someplace. They are all the living beings alive today. And so this is there's a verse from Buddha: I have not seen a single living being who has not been the mother of all the rest. He also said, I've not seen a single living being who's not been the father of all the rest, the brother, the sister, the friend, the neighbor. Again, it doesn't matter very much if you understand this in a literal way. Try thinking in this way. Try adopting this as like software for your mind. Try thinking in this way. Imagine that when you walk around, everyone you see, with the people in this call, imagine that these people here, 5 people, imagine that these people are your mothers from previous lives, or your fathers, or brothers, sisters, friends, your neighbors here. What if they're all actually secretly family? I live, coincidental fun fact, no real relationship, but Sadhana and I actually both live in communities that are called the Village. I live in a place called the Village. It's a beautiful name, Village. Not a lot of nice houses, little community and so forth. I don't know any of my neighbors, or I know just a few of these local neighbors. It's not really a village, right? Because we go elsewhere for work. And these days, most people don't really live in villages. Maybe it's a little different if you're retired. But otherwise, most people don't really live in villages anymore. We're surrounded by strangers. Do you work with friends or do you work with strangers? Right? There's a question that's asked at our company. We sometimes asks this question in the employee surveys: do you have close friends at work? Why do they ask that question? Because it's one of the biggest determinants of your job satisfaction and employee retention. Right? Do you have close friends at work? Do you feel a closeness, a sense of connection to the people you work with? It's interesting how many people would answer no to that question, right? Around the world. They don't have any close friends at work. Where do they have close friends? Hopefully somewhere, right? But the pandemic has really messed with people's way of connecting with friends and feeling that sense of a warm heart and a sense of closeness. Where do a lot of people feel that sense of warm heart and closeness? Maybe if they go to the bar, right? They get a little bit drunk. The social boundaries between themselves and others, they soften a little bit. They feel some sense of camaraderie, connection. When you eat together with somebody else, you help that, you bond when you eat together. When you're at a sports game and you're getting into the game and you're super excited and the people around you are super excited, you can bond then. If you go to a concert and you're totally getting into the music, right? What happens when you get into the music? You forget about who you are. You go to a rock concert. It's been a while, so correct me if my details are off, right? But you forget about who you are, right? You stop being that person who's this or that, and you're in this crowd. And what are you all? You're all dancers, right? You're all listeners. There's something very, very profound that happens in these experiences. There is an incredibly profound and powerful experience that humans can have when they're bonding with others in a group. And it's easier or harder for us to get it. And the way in which we get that feeling of connection is healthier or unhealthier, right? Some people, their way of feeling connected is every night they go out and get drunk, right? And then they're like, but it's not a healthy way to feel connected with others, right? If that's the only way you have to really feel connected. So I remember reading a social psychologist saying that they feel one of the reasons there was such a strong social movement in the summer of 2020, right? Just what's that now? Almost 2 years now, right? That the movement kicked off partly by George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and people out on the streets and protesting and so forth. Although obviously huge, social trends for decades that have been building up, and the internet was a factor and so forth. But some of it, these social psychologists were saying, was just everybody had been holed up for many months in their house. They couldn't get out. They couldn't connect with friends. They couldn't see anybody. They weren't in groups. And we were craving that connection, right? So I went to only one march during that time. It was very meaningful. It was a very moving experience to be in a collection of people, especially chanting, yelling, and so forth. So these protests are bonding experiences. And in that, what happens is your sense of self softens. And all of a sudden, you're not an independent, isolated person, part of something bigger, right? And you're not with strangers. Well, or maybe you are a little bit, but to some degree, the boundaries soften. So in the meditation, right, when we're meditating on feeling a deep sense of connection with others, for example, imagine seeing everyone around us as family, everyone in this community as family, secretly that we didn't realize. It doesn't mean we should not we should not go to extremes and act in strange ways. That's an important caveat, right? Don't act weird. It's just a ground rule. Just don't act weird, right? Or not too weird, at least. But feeling that sense of closeness. Do we know these people? That is the purpose of this meditation on affectionate love. Feeling this sense, instead of feeling the sense of some people are attractive and some are unattractive, some are pleasant, some are unpleasant. Some are friends, we like them. Others were enemies, we don't like them. we can feel a gentle, like this ground of affectionate love, this even, smooth space, feeling like everybody is basically the same. Everybody is equalized in the sense of all being like relatives, like friends, like we've had a special relationship with this person in previous lives, perhaps. Or in this life, we just say we're all family. We're basically biologically identical. We're basically all, all of us, no matter where you're coming from. Aside from us minor details, we're all basically biologically identical. This is what it means to develop a different belief about the relationship between ourselves and others. This is the first method of developing affection love. The second method is contemplating the kindness of others. And so when we're contemplating the kindness of others, as I mentioned, I started describing that with respect to the kindness of our mother, like the kindness we've received from our mother. Literally, our body comes from the kindness of others, from our parents. Even also the food that we've eaten has nourished our body. That's come from others. There's many, many people working hard every day. I'm trying not to spend any time on Twitter, but one of the last things I did on Twitter a couple months ago is I found the United Farm Workers has a Twitter account, United Farm Workers, and they post pictures of farm workers picking the food that, you eat. And I'm like, I've rarely seen pictures of farm workers. This is how, distant we are, many of us in our society, from where our food comes from. And it's just very heartwarming. It's very helpful to think about, the stories of the people working long days every day, growing food that sustains us. Our happiness depends on others. Everything we enjoy in our life has been produced by someone. The music you listen to, the books you've read, the things you bought, the house that you live in. All of these things have been produced by others. Even our ideas, right? Our education. The fact that we're able to use a common language. I'm saying all these words. You seem to be understanding me. How? We've been taught, right? We've had many, many teachers who've explained these different concepts over the years, been educated, authors, journalists, teachers, and so forth. All of our knowledge comes from other people, including our friends. Even our spiritual understanding as well, that comes, it's a human legacy. It's just like we have our biological legacy, and the importance of preserving ecosystems around the world is preserving this biological legacy of humanity in the earth. There's a cultural legacy. And the cultural legacy, one of the main manifestations is these spiritual teachings that have been passed down generation after generation. The only reason spiritual teachings have made it to the present day is because of a continuous line of people who found those teachings so valuable for themselves and had so much concern to pass them along that people have passed those along generation after generation. So we can appreciate kindness in all of these aspects in spiritual teachings as well. Okay, so that's a long preliminary explanation, longer than usual, but wanted to help to sow some of these understandings in our mind. So what we can do now is to take some time to meditate, to just allow ourselves to soak this in. So when we meditate, people sometimes don't understand the meaning and the purpose of meditation. It's not just to sit there. It's not just to breathe or to do something a bit mindless. Everything that I mentioned here is a meditation. They're all meditations. If you've got any special feeling along the way, any sense of closeness, connection to others, any sense of appreciation for the kindness of others, any warm heart or feeling of closeness, that's the object of meditation. That's what we're meditating on. So I'll use a few words maybe to remind us as we go through this time. But really, meditation just means giving yourself the time to soak in teachings that move your heart, change your heart. So, okay. So for our meditation time, we just sit comfortably. If it helps to reduce distractions, we can close our eyes. We take a deep breath in and out. And another breath, just inviting ourselves to relax. Then another breath, asking ourselves, what is important right now? So we begin by focusing on our breathing for a few breaths, but we reflect on our body as we breathe, and we think this body is produced from our parents. It's genetically the product of our parents. We have a healthy body and mind because our mother looked after us, cared for us when we were in her womb. So we can begin by recalling the kindness of our mother, ignoring any complaints or things we felt may have been unkind. We focus very simply on the fact that without her, we would not exist. She nourished us with her body, with her love, care, advice, protection, fed us, clothed us, cleaned us, housed us. But this life that we have is only one very brief flicker in the whole of time. Whatever we are, wherever we came from, we are as old as the universe. We've had countless relationships with others in the past. Whatever we think the self may be. And what has happened to all of those past relationships? Where are all those beings that we've been connected to, our past mothers? They are all the living beings alive today. They too are as old as the universe. Our existence is interwoven with the existence of every other being. We are part of a single, unbroken fabric. Instead of feeling isolated from others, living in a world of strangers, we soak in the feeling of living in a world of hidden connections. And we can feel every moment of every day we are nourished by this network of hidden connections. We have received kindness, inestimable kindness in the past from our parents, teachers, friends, family, but even strangers, people we've never met, growing, picking the food that we eat, building the world we live in. Delivering everything that we delight in. Down to even the thoughts that we think, our knowledge, understanding has all come from others. We just generate a warm heart and a feeling of closeness towards others instead of feeling we live in a world of friends, enemies, and strangers. Develop this feeling, living in a world of fabric, of interconnection. Then we can think our mind is changing all the time. Every moment our mind is changing, evolving. Here we have intentionally changed our mind, stretched, deepened this feeling of affectionate love. By doing this, we have strengthened mental pathways that will eventually become a great mental highway. Deep, deep, abiding habit that pervades our mind at all times and influences everyone we touch, come in contact with. And we make a decision that as we leave our meditation, go about our life, we hold this special feeling in our heart, a warm heart and feeling of closeness, instead of grouping people into friends, enemies, and strangers.